James Cook and the Buffalo Bills officially have a deal, $48 million contract extension with $30 million guaranteed. Katie Caldwell, Jeff Lloyd back here with you. Jeff, what's your reaction to this deal getting done?
I think for Buffalo, and this is when these things really get difficult because when you kind of hit a stalemate, all of a sudden maybe like imaginary dirty laundry kind of comes out, if you know what I'm saying, because, you're trying to strengthen either the organization's, power here in this deal, or certainly from the players' perspective, in trying to get what they deem to be, their fair amount. But if you look at what Cook has done for this team, and everybody, oh well, indispensable. You play Ray Davis, play. James Cook has just been such a really strong part of that offense, and not just as a runner. And I really think that's where the strength for Cook in this negotiation probably came from is just what he also brings as a receiver as well.
Yeah.
And his contributions pretty much from day one as a rookie, and where he gets his money, he gets him again. I think about seventh, I want to say, as far as highest paid running backs. And maybe the name alone is probably something where people are like, well, James Cook is the seventh highest, paid running back. But then when you actually get a little deeper into it, you look at the production and certainly, the security blanket aspect for Josh Allen works so well in the scramble drill with Josh Allen as well. It's one of those things where, he's probably not as heralded as he deserves necessarily to be. And certainly for Buffalo, I believe their point is, we want to get this deal done. We don't necessarily want to have to overpay. But at the end of the day, with you look at it and who's probably outside of Josh Allen, the top skill player and producer for that Buffalo
Mhm.
Bills offense, it's pretty quite obvious, in my opinion, that it is James Cook.
It is to me too. I completely agree. So his even with his production last year, James Cook only played 47.5% of snaps. Does this deal signal a bigger role for him ahead, or is Buffalo still committed to a rotation in the backfield?
On Buffalo, I don't know why I would necessarily change anything, because it really worked well. I mean, that 47.5 number certainly can be arbitrary.
Hmm.
Maybe there's weeks where Buffalo, just didn't need him through four quarters. And you certainly have a guy now, Ray Davis, who's shown that he can produce as well and only in his second year. So obviously they're going to save some money getting some production out of Ray Davis. Um, and kind of stormrolled through the AFC East. Certainly there's some weeks where you didn't necessarily have to, feature James Cook. And of course, a lot of it also for Buffalo is the first 17 games of the year for Buffalo don't necessarily matter. It would certainly be about games 18, 19,
Yeah.
20, et cetera, et cetera. And ideally, James Cook is, somebody that you're going to need and probably would see a spike in snap percentage, come the playoffs. You don't want to overwork any running back because of, if they are that vital to your offense, the importance for them for the, basically the marathon, not the sprint, certainly is there. Um, but it would, certainly I think there'll be weeks where maybe it's even that Ray Davis just had a hot hand. And you
Hmm.
know what? There was no reason, or it was a closer game, so Josh was actually throwing more than maybe he would on a normal week, where maybe the Bills were kind of in a cruise control type of game. See that number, I think, that was last season. That was, each season's probably going to be a bit different. But for the end of the day, James Cook didn't want to leave. There was, and that's
Hmm.
why you end up
Why
doing a
would
hold in
you?
it. If you're aggravated and you want to leave,
Hmm.
we usually know, you know what I'm saying? And I think James Cook just knows how valuable he is to that team. There is not a player who plays in Buffalo that does not sing the graces of that community. And, certainly, for Josh Allen, he knows what James Cook does and how much he makes his life easier. So it's a win all around, just unfortunately, sometimes things, it's not always the prettiest path to get to the ultimate satisfaction of the team and the player. But it's
Hmm.
over. It's done with. And, Buffalo now just all eyes, starting to, week one and just, again, to get themselves as far as they can in January with the hopes of it possibly being February.
Do they have enough depth behind him? Do you feel good about their running game as a whole now that we do have everything locked up and we see the full picture of that run game heading into the season?
I do. And for me, the thing that, I kind of look at, with running back rooms is, and a lot of teams want to be able to play and rotate three guys, but there has to be an understanding that, through 17, well, 18 weeks, 17 games, there's going to be a week or two where you necessarily don't have all three guys.
Yeah.
And, how is the room assembled? And, if one guy is out, how does the room hopefully still perform and meet expectations? Say James Cook misses a week. Well, we know Ray Davis can run between the tackles. We know Ray Davis can handle the load as a runner. Tyron Johnson, it's really interesting because when the Jets let him go a couple of years ago, he was kind of stagnant for a couple of weeks. And here's a guy that's a really, really plus receiver, which is I think for the running backs in general, you either have great receiving running backs or you got to have guys that basically don't contribute much at all. So if it wasn't Cook, you would still have the combination of Davis and you would have the combination of Johnson. Say Davis was out. Okay, well, we can maybe use James Cook a little bit more to tote the rock. Meanwhile, the passing situations, we can use Johnson. If it was Johnson, obviously, all right, well, maybe Ray Davis can do a little more of the heavy lifting. We can have James Cook, certainly excel as a receiver. So I really like the way that room is put together, with the understanding that, it's completely unrealistic to believe that you're going to have a three-man running back rotation for all 17 regular season games. So
Yeah.
I think Buffalo is really set up pretty well. They can run the ball and they have some guys, obviously, that Josh Allen can use at his disposal within the passing game. They need some guys to obviously, take a couple of steps up as far as receivers. Keon Coleman needs to produce more this year than he did last year.
Mhm.
Khalil Shakur, who's kind of like their not spoken about, probably wide receiver one. Currently, is nursing a high ankle sprain. The thought is he will be available for week one. They brought in Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore didn't have the greatest go with the Jets. Things got better at times for the Browns, not so much in 2024, but nothing went well in 2024 for Cleveland in general. And you really think for Elijah Moore, this might actually be the year because he's finally going to go to a team where there are zero questions at the quarterback position. So I think for Buffalo, this really works out well for them as far as, there is nothing the defense is just going to focus on trying to take away from them. And
Mhm.
even when teams have, Josh Allen has always had a great ability to go to option B, C, D, whatever.
Yeah.
We've talked about this, probably for months now. There's teams and players like Lamar Jackson and
Mhm.
Josh Allen, and the only goal at this point is to get to the level you haven't got to, which is obviously going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl.
This is the sixth major extension the Bills have handed out this offseason. Are they locking in a championship window or are they pushing future cap problems down the road? And I feel like my answer to this would have been different than a few years ago because the Rams really did change this for me. Like what around the time they made it to the Super Bowl, I think a lot of us were saying, sure, they're pushing all their chips into the middle, but they're going to be screwed in a few years. We're still talking about the Rams being super, super competitive. How do you look at the Bills as a whole with all these moves they're making?
Well, I think, and unfortunate for fans, obviously, where these games, go more and more to streaming networks. That certainly, obviously, aids the league. It certainly aids every NFL franchise because what is
Yep.
this directly going to affect? It's going to direct the salary cap going up. So, it's hard to envision, just how much the jump is going to be, say, for, just one season where we're talking usually anywhere 12, 14, $15 million to where this money gets, comes more and more through the streaming services where you believe that number probably is going to start to go on average, go even higher over maybe the next
Mhm.
2, 3 seasons. But if a lot of it comes down to whether or not you have a willing owner and a willing owner who has money, and is willing to put some of his own money into his product. There's certainly teams, that go down this road. The Browns are one of them. The Saints. I don't think the Saints' issues right now are necessarily finances because everybody always talks about the Saints when they talk about this type of situation. I think the Saints just their window closed. And now it's,
Yep.
regrouping, getting younger, trying to get cheaper, and then obviously going back to spend that money one more time. I don't think Buffalo is concerned probably anytime soon. And for Buffalo, yeah, it's all in. It is absolutely all in. And it's funny because in the AFC, you probably can say that about 3, 4, 5 franchises, where the
Yep.
NFC, you're probably not going to say the same thing.
That's so true.